Welcome to the Inside Scoop. Today, four-star QB Walker White joins the show. Sooner Scoop joined the On3 network, so we're talking Oklahoma recruiting. But first, who won the month of April? There was over 100 commitments in the 2024 class. I know this because I counted. Well, I tried to count. I got to about 100, and there's still like 8 days left. So just trust me, there was over 100 commitments in the month of April, and we're going to name a winner. Let's bring on the national recruiting analyst at On3, Sam Spiegelman, to talk a little bit more about the crazy month. Sam, I know it's May right now, and we have about 8 months to go until the early signing period in December, but let's talk some winners for the month of April. But before we get into that, we did see some big visit weekends all across the country. What are a few that stood out to you this spring?
Yeah, well, Oregon obviously got the spotlight on the final weekend of April, so they're still kind of shining bright with all the stars that they had on campus. But you can't forget that both Florida and Florida State had huge recruiting weekends for their spring games. Also, LSU getting Joe Burrow, Angel Reese, and five-star plus edge Colin Simmons on campus is also worth noting.
Sam, only two quarterbacks in the top 10 remain uncommitted, Dylan Raiola and Elijah Brown. Why do you think it is that we see a run on quarterbacks first before a lot of the other elite recruits make their decisions?
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that Dylan Raiola decommitted from Ohio State, which kind of restarted the quarterback cycle, but a good chunk were already committed to their schools last fall. Midway through their junior years, we're seeing in the 2024 cycle, the elite top 20 quarterbacks in the country for the most part committed, putting together their classes around them, already focused on getting to school to make an impact, leaving only a handful for the spring.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we talked to Walker White later on in the show, and he kind of explains why it's so important as a quarterback to get committed early so you can build that recruiting class around you. That's exactly what he's doing at Auburn. All right, Sam, let's talk winners in April. When I told you a couple days ago we're going to name winners, who are some teams that popped into your head?
Yeah, you have to look at Michigan. They made a lot of headlines with their 4 for 4, and they really fortified the offensive line, which has been a position of strength for the Wolverines the past 2 years. They're the Joe Moore winners, two-time defending. They got a legacy 4-star offensive tackle, one of 3 offensive linemen committed, also fortified the trenches on the defensive side of the ball, and also look at LSU. Locking up the home state of Louisiana, getting several of the best guys committed, including tight end Trey'Dez Green, 4-star safety Deshaun McBride, and they're also trending with a good chunk of the top 10 players in the state after the month of April. But I went with Ohio State. No team is hotter than the Buckeyes after April. You have to start with finding their quarterback of the future. That was a big quest after Dylan Raiola reopened his recruitment. They end up with the number 5 quarterback in the On300, Aaron Noland. Brian Hartline is putting his stamp on the offense. They get another 5-star wide receiver for Mylan Graham to join Jeremiah Smith on the offensive side of the ball. They get rolling in the state of Texas. They get one of the most coveted linebackers in the country, Peyton Pierce. They also land their running back of the future, James Peoples, one of 3 running backs that Ohio State landed, along with Ohio native Sam Williams-Dixon, who play multiple positions for the Buckeyes, and Jordan Lyle out of Fort Lauderdale, an On3 outlier in the top 100 in the country. And in addition, Ohio State comes out of the month trending for the number 1 player in the country. Larry Johnson has made Dylan Stewart a top priority up front on the edge. I like where the Buckeyes stand. Josh, who do you think won the month?
Initially, I was thinking Oregon, but that might be some recency bias because that was just this past weekend with their big visit weekend. I also thought Nebraska, where they had the 3 number 1s on campus in early April. They had Dylan Raiola, Brandon Baker, and Williams Nwaneri, 3 number 1 players at their position. But ultimately, Sam, I was going with the Florida State Seminoles. 4 commitments in the month of April. They also flip a 5-star from Georgia, which in itself was just maybe the biggest surprise of the 2023 cycle so far. Florida State flipping a 5-star tight end, Landon Thomas, from the defending back-to-back national champions. Didn't really see that one coming. And then also coming out of the month, FSU leads publicly for multiple 5-stars. You talked to Jonathan Daniels out of Pensacola. He said Florida State is his leader. And also Charles Lester, a 5-star corner, said publicly that if today was signing day, he would be a Nole. So we'll see where that goes. But coming out of the month, FSU sitting at number 7. They started the month outside the top 10 of the On3 industry rankings. And now they're at number 7, knocking on the door of a top 5 class. We'll see what the month of May provides for the Seminoles, but right now they're cooking. There are some other teams that I think got off to a good start too. Maybe they didn't win the month of April, right? But they still are off to a great start. You got the Florida Gators loading up at linebacker and running back, 2 positions of need heading into the cycle. Not only do they get players at their position, but elite prospects at those 2 positions. And also, how can you forget about DJ Lagway, the centerpiece of the Florida Gator class right now? Oklahoma got things revved up, huh, Sam? They might not have won April, but they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, they put themselves in a position long-term with some of the best in the country on the offensive side of the ball, including 5-star wide receiver Brian Wesco. They've received a couple of commitments on the offensive side of the ball last month, and really putting themselves to load up on the defensive side of the ball. You named him, Williams Nweri, visited Oklahoma in April. David Stone, Nigel Smith, you name it. Brent Venables could be rolling on his side of the ball in due time.
Yeah, and one more notable shout out goes to Coach Beamer in South Carolina. They're number 6 overall, capping it off with 2 stud offensive tackles. Their top 2 ranked players in their class are Josiah Thompson and Cam Pringle. They're getting a lot of guys on campus too, so let's not count out South Carolina at this point. But for the month of April, I like our picks. You're going Ohio State, I'm going Florida State. Sam, let's do it again next month. Oklahoma is hot on the trail, but what's it going to take to get them to the next level? I want to bring on Josh McCuistion from Sooner Scoop. You know, the big news here at On3 hit on Monday is the leader in the Oklahoma fan site market is now here on the On3 network. I'm excited to have the best Oklahoma Sooner recruiting expert on the show as a regular guest. Josh, great to have you on the network.
Yeah, again, couldn't be more excited about this. I mean, we've talked a lot about this, and obviously having a long-standing relationship with a lot of people at On3, it's huge for us. I mean, and the response from the Oklahoma fans, I think, was they were waiting for us to do something like this. So I think it's been kind of perfect for everybody.
Yeah, it's been in the works for a minute, and glad you're finally here at On3. Oklahoma started a little slow in the 24 cycle, but things have started to pick up with the addition of quarterback Michael Hawkins last month. And just last week, Zion Kearney, the number 10 ranked wide receiver in the country, committed to Oklahoma. Josh, has this kind of eased a little bit of Oklahoma fans' anxiety when it comes to recruiting a bit?
I think it has. I mean, there have been some positive moves. They're clearly starting to make, you know, some of the I guess, for lack of a better word to say it again, just moves in the right direction with what they want to do as far as positionally. They can start to really I don't want to say pressure, but they can start to really push on some of the guys they're really wanting as they start to figure out their numbers, what they're looking like, who their priorities are going to be. And, you know, Zion Kearney was a guy that I think 2 months ago, very few people were talking about Oklahoma. So that's a big win for them. And a guy that I think nationally maybe isn't as well known as he should be. Actually living in the Houston area, I've seen him several times, just a big bodied, super athletic receiver. And then you throw in what's possible. You know, you talk about the Bryant Wescos and you get into some of these other spots, and it really feels like Oklahoma is starting to build momentum. And to help OU fans in their concern is last year. I mean, at this point last year, Oklahoma had 3 commitments in what eventually became a top 5 class, you know, almost industry wide. So I think they can console themselves a little bit and know that all their big fish, or at least most of their big fish, are still out there. They're not guys that, oh, we missed on this guy, we missed on that guy. They still have a very real chance, a lot of big names.
Right. And let's take a look at some of the big fish that are out there. I mean, Oklahoma is moving to the SEC, so they need to start recruiting at that elite level right now. Let's start right there at the top. 5-star linebacker Edric Houston. He's one of the top players in the Southeast. He's the number 1 linebacker for the On3 consensus team rankings. UGA in Alabama. What's it going to take for Oklahoma to get in there with Edric Houston?
Oh, I mean, the thing that I think you have to start with is almost a victory for Oklahoma, and him just coming on an unofficial this spring seemed to really like it from everybody I talked to. At the same time, I guess the next time Oklahoma makes a major win in Georgia, that's going to be the first time. Now it's going to happen. I mean, you feel like there at some point the dam will break. But, you go back to Brock Vandegrift. I mean, a guy that, Oklahoma had committed, obviously a huge prospect out of Georgia. And at the last second, not the last second, but later in the process after he'd committed, there was the, inevitable decommitment and flip to Georgia. That wasn't about a new offer or anything like that. He decided to stay closer to home. So that's something Oklahoma's going to battle. But again, with Todd Bates and his reputation on the defensive line, I mean, an official visit seems entirely possible. And then if you go from there, who knows? If Oklahoma can put together a strong year and kind of have some proof of concept, there's no reason to think that can't work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is there is some work to be done to get Edric Houston to OU. Like you said, an official visit is key. Now, here's a guy that is already trending to Oklahoma, 5-star defensive lineman Williams Nwaneri. What have the Sooners done to position themselves with 87% of the predictions on the recruiting prediction machine heading towards the Sooners' direction?
I think part of it is, not only the relationships he has, Caden Green, obviously the big offensive lineman last year that is his teammate, enrolled early at Oklahoma. I think there's been a good bond there. Also, PJ Adebawore, another Kansas City area guy that he knows, and obviously would probably, in OU's dream scenario, those two are lining up opposite of each other. So, you get that appeal. Beyond that, I think a lot of it the credit has to go to Miguel Chavis. I mean, this is a guy that a lot of energy, very young defensive ends coach. Obviously, last year was his first year as a full-time position guy after following Brent Venables over from Clemson. And, to go land PJ Adebawore in your first ever class as a recruiter, it speaks to his ability to develop relationships. And I think he's done a great job with Williams. And I think just, you hear a lot of Tennessee buzz kind of as of late. I know Chad Simmons has talked about it. And I mean, there's no question. Oklahoma knows they're going to be in a dogfight from beginning to end for a guy of this caliber. But at the same time, I think Oklahoma's done a great job getting him to campus as often as possible. I expect him to return in the summer. And then, like I said, I think at that point, they also have a lot of advantages built in. His head coach signed with Oklahoma out of high school, many, many moons ago. And his son, Isaiah Mosey, is another big OU recruit in the 2025 class. So there's a lot that connects him to Oklahoma. That helps. And then again, just the relationships. And the thing that I will say, and, I know I've got 7 different answers to your question here, but Brent Venables and his relationships in Kansas City and Missouri, going back to his days at Kansas State, they're very hard to beat. That's something that Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley had to deal with several times, where they were trying to win guys in those areas. And it was very difficult just because of the fact that, Brent and his reputation, not only as a defensive mind and a defensive coach, but his reputation with the coaching staffs of, kind of doing right by their players.
Oklahoma is in a couple dogfights, because if Williams Nwaneri is a dogfight, then Dominic McKinley is as well. For what's it going to take for OU to go into the state of Louisiana and pull the number 1 prospect away from the LSU Tigers?
I mean, you're talking about something OU hasn't done in almost 20 years. I mean, going in and truly beating LSU for a guy they wanted. I mean, you're going back to like Rufus Alexander. I know a lot of people won't even remember Rufus. He's now on staff at Oklahoma, if that gives you some idea of what we're talking about. But it is possible. I think when he made his visit earlier this spring, Dominic was very clear how much it surprised him. I think he really liked Oklahoma more than he expected to. Obviously, our colleague Jerry Hamilton has, broke some news yesterday that he'll be back on campus on June 9th for an official visit. I think that's both good news and bad news for Oklahoma, in that June 9th, obviously great to have talented guys coming on campus using their official visits. The problem is he's not coming in on June 16th, which is going to be Oklahoma's really big kind of home run weekend. It's their barbecue event that's, fairly well known in recruiting circles. And I think the problem with that is, You couldn't get him on campus for that. Where is he prioritizing you? Where does he have Oklahoma in his hierarchy? And it may be, I haven't talked to Dominic yet. It may be a scheduling conflict. It could be a lot of things. But at the same time, it's one of those things where I'm like, that tells me that maybe they've got some pretty considerable ground to make up.
All right. The last SEC recruiting battle that I want to talk about is Caden Durham. He's out of Duncanville, Texas. Now, we know Duncanville has Colin Simmons, who's right now trending to LSU on the RPM. But what's Oklahoma's chances with Durham right now?
This one, I think people keep trying to throw other teams into this race. This is going to be OU or LSU. I just don't have any real doubts about that. But I think the biggest thing, and, I think most people know at this point, obviously Caden grew up in Oklahoma City, knows a lot of people there, including guys like David Stone. And I know Michael Patterson McDonald, a safety offer for Oklahoma and several other schools in the, kind of South Oklahoma City area. And I think there's a lot of connection there. Obviously has a lot of familiarity with DeMarco Murray, a lot of respect. Obviously grew up kind of in Oklahoma City while DeMarco Murray was doing his thing at OU. So there's some real credibility there. I will say, I think at one point, maybe a couple of months ago, I thought OU was going to be very, very difficult to beat. They're still my choice, but man, it's skin of your teeth. It's really close between OU and LSU. I think there is a question of, does he follow his teammates? Obviously, like you said, Colin Simmons trending to LSU, and some of the, obviously Duncanville and LSU, there's some connection there. Does he follow in that direction, or is it more of a, I think he tweeted out just before we started recording, he was talking about some connections to Oklahoma and, mentioned it feeling like home or something like that. So there is a lot of heartstrings kind of with Oklahoma. And is that strong enough? Does that mitigate anything at LSU? I don't know. I mean, like I said, we talk about these guys a lot of times where, oh yeah, it's interesting and we'll see what happens. But I think we kind of know in our gut with Caden Durham, I think it's legitimately a real conversation. Like I could see it going either way.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot more of these SEC kind of battles taking place for OU as the months go on. We're only about midway through this 2024 recruiting cycle. Now, Josh, I couldn't bring you on the inside scoop without bringing up five-star defensive lineman David Stone. He's coming off of a big visit to Oregon for their spring game over the weekend, and you know how visits usually go. It does sound very positive for the Ducks. But OU has been trending on the recruiting prediction machine. Do you still feel good where Oklahoma stands coming out of the spring?
I really do. And I think Oklahoma, their biggest hurdle, because, I mean, I've known David since he was a freshman in high school. We've got a long relationship. And when I talked to him, there was always this feeling of like, I want to go to Oklahoma, but there was always kind of a reason why he wouldn't. And I think as time's gone on, I think most publicly have kind of sorted out that there's some family members that are a little concerned about, just him being at Oklahoma, and if that's the best thing for him, or getting out from home might be a little bit better. And, people can read that however they want to. But I think this spring, Oklahoma has done a really good job through several sources. I've heard conversations about he and Gerald McCoy, the former, Oklahoma All-American, just retired in the NFL. Maybe them having some conversations. They're from a similar area in Oklahoma City. They're going to know common people and that kind of thing. So I think that is an interesting avenue that may work out for Oklahoma. We'll kind of see how that goes. But I like where Oklahoma is. But David, I mean, he is a curveball machine. Like just when you think where David is, he's 12 feet to the left. So he is tough to read, but he has fun with it. And I enjoy it a lot about it. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand, like I said, with that McCoy relationship, because they're very similar and they're being very outgoing, gregarious guys. And I think that works to their advantage. And, and like I said, with Todd Bates, there's a lot of respect from David in that relationship, and knowing what Todd has done through his career, I think makes Oklahoma, I don't want to say a perfect landing spot for David, but it makes it one of those things where someone's really going to have to blow him away for him to do something else.
All right. Well, I'm sure Oklahoma fans are excited to see those picks keep coming in for the Oklahoma Sooners when it comes to David Stone, regardless of who he visits. The recruiting is going good for Oklahoma, but Josh, my question to you is, How can Oklahoma recruiting go from good to great in year 2 under Brent Venables?
I think the place you have to focus, I mean, and it's I don't think it's any surprise to you or anyone else, it's the defensive line. When I look at what they've done in 18 months, and I mean, I did the count the other day, and I think from when when Oklahoma finished that game against Oregon in the Alamo Bowl, right after Venables was hired, Lincoln Riley had gone to USC, I want to say there's 21 scholarship players left from that 85-man roster. So we can talk about Dion and all these other things, but Oklahoma's had a massive overhaul of its roster. And I look at around, and I mean, it's a more talented roster in so many ways. Obviously, you can't replace a Caleb Williams, but with that exception, I think it's a deeper and better roster. I love what they've done in the secondary. I've loved what they've done at linebacker. That defensive line, if Oklahoma is going to go into the SEC and be the kind of program it expects to be, they've got to get better up there. I mean, we've talked about Williams Nwaneri. We've, David Stone, a guy that I love, and I think nationally everybody's just starting to figure this out as far as how special he is the Joseph Jonah Ajanye kid from Conroe, Texas. He is a very gifted guy, great frame, and just one of those guys that, in Texas, when those guys come along, you have to get those guys. Like, you've got to go land them because there's not enough supply of them in Texas, Oklahoma, and the regions that OU is, kind of one of the forefront programs. So I like where they are with him a lot. He's come up a couple of times. I expect him back in the summer. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he comes to a decision in July, August, something like that. And if OU can get those pieces, and you throw in maybe a big play guy like Bryant Wesco at wide receiver, it's just a matter of finding those premier guys that you can't replace. I mean, we all know, right. Obviously 3-4 stars, we expect Oklahoma to land those guys. It's the guys that make the plays in, late December, early January, though. You need those difference makers. And I think if there's one position or two positions where OU just doesn't have those guys right now, it's wide receiver and defensive line.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the names that you brought up would put Oklahoma right at the doorstep of maybe a top 5 class in 2024. That would be exciting. Josh, it's really exciting to have the #1 Oklahoma Sooner brand on the On3 network now. Appreciate you coming by the Inside Scoop. You're not going to be a stranger. We're going to have you on all summer talking Oklahoma recruiting.
I am ready to come by anytime. It is, I'm always excited, and absolutely, we couldn't be more excited about On3. So this is going to be a great thing for all OU fans out there.
All right. Thanks for joining. We've got a very special guest joining the Inside Scoop from Little Rock, Arkansas. 4-star Auburn QB commitment Walker White joins the Inside Scoop. Walker is the number 10 rated QB in the country. The 6'3", 225-pound passer chose Auburn back in February over Clemson, Ole Miss, Baylor, and Arkansas. Be sure you are to follow Walker White on all social platforms as well. All right, let's welcome in Walker White to the show. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. I just got out of practice, so this is not like what I was wearing around, but I just got out of practice and just got home, so happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
It's all good. I appreciate your time. When you made your decision back in February, you chose Auburn over Clemson, Baylor, and Ole Miss. When did you know in your head that the Auburn Tigers were going to be the pick?
Yeah, so I visited Auburn January 16th, and then I went on to visit Baylor, Arkansas, and then Clemson. And I had great visits at each visit. And after my Clemson visit that night, I kind of was up till like around 1 a.m. just kind of sorting my thoughts because I knew I wanted to commit the following weekend. And so I was just up, and my brother called me, and he helped me sort out my thoughts because I really loved the Clemson visit. It was the best visit I could have been on. But at the end of the day, my heart was just for Auburn, and that's what I prayed for. I just asked the Lord that he would give me a peace about a school, and that was Auburn. And I followed him I followed the call to Auburn, and ever since then, my decision has been certified and confirmed, and I've loved every second, getting to know the staff better and doing my job as a recruiter to get guys around me.
Now, we're going to talk about Coach Hugh Freeze in a minute, but I want to talk about Auburn OC Philip Montgomery and what's your relationship like with him? Because at the end of the day, that's the guy that you're going to spend the most one-on-one time with.
Yeah, so I got to know him around the summer going into my sophomore year. I was at a mega camp at Oklahoma, and he was the head coach at Tulsa at the time. And him and Coach Trahan came to watch the mega camp, and they offered me on the spot after that camp, and that was really special. So I ended up going to visit Tulsa, and I got to talk with Coach Montgomery and Trahan, and they loved me, and I really loved them. And they're great Christian guys, and Coach Montgomery is a great Christian dude with great morals, and I know that he has so much experience, obviously being the OC for Baylor when he coached RG3. So him having so many different calibers of quarterbacks and very different style of play quarterback, like I know that whatever like my style is and what he sees, he can conform, and he knows how to teach each quarterback. And so I'm just really excited to get under that staff and get developed, because that's one of the biggest things I know going into Auburn that I know I will be developed. And Coach Montgomery and I have a great relationship. You know, he's really easy to get along with, and he has a really good offense. We've gotten to go over it a lot over Zoom, and me and him just click really well, and I kind of understand the terminology really well, and I'm just very excited to get into it.
Who do you like to watch play the quarterback position? It could be a college athlete, it could be a pro QB, but I don't want to say model your game after, but who do you like to watch?
I love watching Josh Allen personally. My favorite team is the Cowboys, but the Bills are a close second, because I just think Josh Allen and I share a lot of the qualities he possesses, such as like his size and that he can run, and he's a great thrower. And I just I love watching him, and I model so much of what I do after him, and I love it. Love seeing how hard and how aggressive he plays.
I can see that a little bit. I see where you're coming from. Walker, you're active on social media, and I feel like your voice resonates among some of the other prospects out there in your class. Who are some guys that you are recruiting personally to come to join you at Auburn?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question, but I mean, you can go from O-lineman, which is like Daniel Calhoun, Jaquan McCoy, Casey Poe, Jamison Riggs, like those guys, and Preston Taimua, and the tight ends like Carter Nelson, Caleb Odom, some of the receivers, Perry Thompson, Cam Coleman, TJ Moore, and the running backs, like I know we already have Jamarian Fat Burnett, but I'm kind of wanting we're needing another guy as well, just to have that to secure that running back class. So Kevin Riley or Daniel Hill, like those guys would be huge. All those guys would be huge for our program.
Yeah, we'll see how you finish up. Maybe I'll nominate you for On3 Recruiter of the Year, depending on how you do, of course.
Yes, sir.
As a quarterback, how much – we talked about some of the factors on why you chose Auburn, but you didn't mention NIL. So did that play into your decision? And if so, how much does NIL play into that?
Yeah, so I'm going to be very honest about how much this was talked about on my visit. And I only visited Auburn once before I committed. And on my visit, I'm pretty sure it came up once, and it was at the very end of the visit. And it wasn't even me. Like, we were watching football at the end of the visit, and we just kind of were in a topic of just kind of talking. And my dad brings it up. He's like, so let's say Walker comes to Auburn. When does NIL process start? And they kind of just told us, like, it's after I sign my papers. And to be honest, like, my mind didn't even come across the NIL stage until, like, he said it. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't even really thought about it, because I was just really enjoying being with the staff and getting to know them so much. So, I mean, honestly, it wasn't much of a factor at all, because honestly, I know that I'm going to be taken care of wherever I go. So it was just really me trying to get to know the program of Auburn and the people and the coaches that I would be around. So it wasn't that much of a factor, just because I know that wherever I go, I'm going to be taken care of. But, you know, it was a very small topic on my visit.
All right, that's interesting. I like to hear what you have to say on that, but it does make sense. I mean, if you go and perform well, you feel like you'll be taken care of when it comes to NIL, correct?
For sure, yes, sir.
All right. Why do you believe in Hugh Freeze and the new staff at Auburn?
So if you look at Coach Freeze and everywhere he's been, you see that he's a winner. It doesn't matter what level or what sport it is, whether it's basketball, like he coached like high school basketball for a little bit, but high school football to Ole Miss to Liberty. I mean, everywhere he's been such a winner, and that has just been like the biggest thing that I've seen. He's made programs and he's flipped them around and totally like brought them a new style of play. And when he was the head coach at Ole Miss, they were winning very few games, or hardly. I don't think they were winning any conference games before he came there. And then like 2 years after that, they were winning 9 games conference. And it's just really impressive. And I love Coach Freeze's energy. Every time I've been to a practice, I've seen how into it he gets, and he's always coaching. And some head coaches kind of let their position coaches coach the players, but I love how Coach Freeze interacts with the players. And even when they were doing like this drill, and I was kind of standing back just watching, he comes back and he's like, okay, so this is what they're doing. They're keying on the safety. If he crashes, they're ripping it over the top. And I was like, okay, like this is cool. Like he's coaching me while like the other quarterbacks are going through a drill. So it's just very interesting. I feel like I click very well with him, and his vision is just so clear to all the prospects that if we can secure these next 2 classes, we can do very special things with the guys that we get around us and build on to what he will do for the next 2 years.
You are about to start your final season of high school football. You're practicing in the spring now, getting in shape for it. What are you working on when it comes to the quarterback position? What are you working on this offseason?
Feet. 100%. Everything I'm doing, I'm focusing on my feet. I'm focusing on my pocket movement, my initial drop to get the proper depth, my fluidity and my movement to get from my progression to progression, and knowing when to get out of the pocket and where to escape. Everything is so I've learned very recently how important feet are, and I have been focusing on just the smaller details of that. And feet, like when you look at the quarterback position, they can't do anything when their feet aren't in the right place. And if I can master my feet and get them in the right place each play, most of the time there's going to be positive yards.
Yeah, get that foundation right and everything else just falls into place. Do you plan on taking any other visits this summer, and when will you be back at Auburn?
So I'm pretty sure I'm camping there June 9th. And I know I'm also going to go watch a fall camp practice. And then I'm also going to go to probably 2 games there. So I'll probably be at Auburn 4 to 5 more times before I get there in January, because I'm enrolling early after my first semester of my senior year.
Do you listen to other schools that might contact you to recruit you or want to bring you in on a summer visit?
I make it very clear to other schools that Auburn's my place and I'm not going anywhere else.
All right, there you have it. That's what Auburn fans wanted to hear. Walker White locked into the Auburn Tigers. Walker, thank you for joining us on the Inside Scoop. I know you just came from practice, so I really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me, and remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.